My name is Kim Atkinson. I'm the Chief Executive at the Scottish Sports Association. The Scottish Sports Association is the independent voice and the representative body for governing bodies of sport in Scotland. A key part of our work is connecting members to the wider policy environment in Scotland, and fundamental to that is connecting our members to the work of the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish Government. As part of the work that we do with the Scottish Parliament, we are delighted to be the secretariat to the cross-party group in sport, on sport, in the Scottish Parliament. Part of that is helping to raise awareness as to the importance and unique contribution of sport and physical activity, but also in connecting broader discussions and cross-sector discussions on the key topics that are impacting on sport in Scotland. I'm delighted to be here today with Liz Smith MSP, the convener of the cross-party group on sport in Scotland, and really hoping that Liz can tell us a little bit more about why the work of the party, the group, is so important.
Yeah, well, it's really good to be here actually, Kim, and it's really nice to see you in person, because let's be honest, the cross-party groups had to focus on Zoom for quite a long time, but no, it is really good. And you know, I think from the angle of connecting with Parliament, I can't thank you enough and praise you enough for all the work that the Scottish Sports Association does, but also all the members who come and attend the cross-party groups, because the feedback that they give us is just so important to what they feel are the big issues that are challenging in sport. And let's be honest, there are plenty of them just now, but it's the engagement with parliamentarians, and I think we're very lucky this is one of the cross-party groups that seems to involve quite a lot of MSPs right across the board. It's not in any way party political. I think that's a really good thing, because it means that we can probably do a bit more when it comes to the kind of issues that we want to talk about. So I'm really pleased about all that.
That's super, and I know sport and physical activity is so important to you, but I know how passionately you believe that it's really important to the wider work of the Parliament as well.
Yes, it is. I mean, I've been a very sporting person all my life actually. I mean, I just absolutely loved it at school, probably spent a bit too much time out on games fields, but I loved it same in university, and you know, even now I do a huge amount of sport, and I'm passionate about it not just because of all the benefits that it gives to you from a health and well-being angle, but I think from a social angle, I think we meet so many interesting people, and I also feel very strongly that connecting with volunteers, without whom sport just would not function. You know, you've done a marvellous job in telling us just how many volunteers are involved, and of course COVID has, you know, brought some issues regarding just how many people there are to help with sport. But sport is very much in my blood. And I know that that's true for some of my colleagues in Parliament, and that what we've tried to do in the cross-party group is to ensure that the passion that we have, which I think identifies with a lot of people who represent the sports associations, is properly put in its place to discuss, as I say, what the benefits are, but also what the challenges are that we're facing.
That makes sense, and I know we've talked quite routinely about some of the different challenges. Volunteering, as you've said, is such an important one, and we know from members that returning volunteers is quite difficult at the moment.
Yes.
There's people who are facing additional barriers more than they've ever found before, both to participation but to volunteering as well.
Yes, I mean, I was very struck at the time where you did your Women and Girls in Sport Week a couple of months ago. I thought that was absolutely first class, and it was something that was so important about addressing some of the issues that do face women and girls, particularly when it comes to the barriers that have been there sometimes for a very long time. I think we're beginning to get over some of these barriers, and it's been very good to see in some of the different sports just how few barriers remain in place, but we've still got a long way to go. And I particularly want to welcome more women into the volunteering role, if that's at all possible, because I think girls often identify with a female role model, and that's something that I think is very important.
I think that's very true, and you're right that focusing on breaking down those barriers has always been a priority for our members, but certainly I think COVID has exacerbated that even more as a relentless focus. And I think there are other opportunities that again, from a policy point of view, we can maybe consider differently. We've talked about time as being a barrier both to people participating and to people volunteering, and maybe educators, something I know you're very passionate as well about, but employers can maybe do more to support that flexibility and that well-being.
Yes, I think you're right, and I think, you know, local government's been under a huge stress because of, you know, finance, and you know, there are facilities around local government that would be wonderful if we can get them back in play, because I think that's very important that we try to use all the facilities that we do have. And you're right about time. There are some situations in Scotland where, you know, wonderful facilities are lying relatively empty at certain times of the day, and we had discussions, as you well remember, in just before COVID about how we could try to improve that situation. So I think there's a lot of work to be done to try and make the best use of resources that we have. But let's be honest, people are at the front of that, and it's about engaging people to ensure that they can enjoy sport as well. Let's be honest, if you're at elite level, there's some tough work that you have to do to get there, but I think so many people want to engage in sport because they want to enjoy what they're doing and not necessarily take it terribly seriously. That is absolutely fine. It's really good for them, it's really good for their health and their mental well-being, and I think that's something that we've got to focus on, because just in the last few days I've been picking up letters from head teachers, partly because of my members bill that's going through on outdoor education, but I've been picking up letters, pretty interesting letters actually, about just how much head teachers feel that being outdoors, being in sport is just so crucial to the post-COVID recovery for many young people, and I think that's something that we need to take on board with the cross-party group.
And that's great, and I think that's reinforcing some of the topics we've covered before. We previously talked about the role of employers in supporting their staff, which is great. That employer support volunteering idea, how that could be different. We also talked about opening up the school estate, something I know we're both very passionate about, and funding you mentioned. I know that's something our members are seeing as being key in that. Being able to have long-term, sustainable and core funding, where not just our members but their member clubs and that wider society can actually focus on delivering the activity and not worrying about whether the project can continue.
So I think when it comes to funding, and I've got great sympathy with people in local government or people who are in clubs and societies in sport who are wanting to plan ahead, especially if they're working with youth groups, which I think is so important. If you're just on a 1-year budget, you don't really know what's going to happen in the future, so I think it's quite important if we can try to get sort of 3-year funding programmes so that people have got a bit of sustainability and stability about what they want to do in the future. I think that's really important for a lot of people in sport, as I said earlier, it's all about whatever level you want to be in. Scotland are so lucky to have fantastic success, and curling, look at them at the weekend, it was just absolutely wonderful to see both men and women in hurling doing so incredibly well. But they're not alone, we've had fantastic success back at the last Commonwealth Games. I think Scotland's got so much to be proud of, but I think it's really important that when it comes to sport, it's not just about elite levels, it's about the grassroots, every level you want to be involved in, that there are the facilities and the funding available to help support that, because that's what sport's all about. It's got to be inclusive, it's got to be seen to be something that everybody can reach out to, and the barriers we were talking about earlier, they do exist for some people, and some people find it difficult to get involved in sports, and we want to make that easier for them.
Definitely, and you're right, our members would routinely say that long-term sustainable core funding is so important, and a big part of core funding is because it's people. As you say, sport is all about people, and therefore the people that can help and engage people, particularly those that are maybe furthest from participating. But that is where we need to make sure that people have sustainability, not just to plan, but to make sure that staff can be retained to run those programmes, and that every programme doesn't have to be new. Ongoing programmes are
some of the best ones are not new.
Exactly.
So I think we've got to make sure that we have a nice mix of that. Yes.
I'm sure a lot of people will have heard what you're saying and thinking, I'd love to be involved.
Yes.
What would you say to whether that's an MSP or somebody that's
engaged
in the
sport? Well, I think in terms of the MSP, we've had really good response. Obviously, after the new Parliament was elected, we've got some new members, which is great. So what we did after that election is just to promote the cross-party group and to explain, what its role is with yourselves, but also to try to. I think the engagement process is so crucial. Because parliamentarians want to know what sporting bodies are saying, and we've got to champion that so much that's good in Scotland. Let's be honest. Look at the Commonwealth Games success and all the people who've done a wonderful job for Scottish sport, and we've got to celebrate that. But we've also got to make sure it's inclusive and that everybody feels comfortable in sport, whatever level they're on. And that's something I think is a big role for the cross-party group. And I think a lot of my colleagues share that view. So that's really good news. But I think we've got a lot of work ahead of us when we reconvene. Hopefully we'll be back in the Parliament after Christmas. We've obviously had a long layoff here to make possible to have visitors in the Parliament. So I'm looking forward to getting back, and I'm sure you are too. So I think the message is that if in any way you want to engage in sport, please come and join us, because I'm sure that the Scottish Sports Association will facilitate your attendance at the group. And I think it's important that we have new members as well as our existing members. And I would say that to my colleagues in Parliament too. If you want to get involved in sport and listening to what the issues are and the challenges that we face, please get involved. The cross-party group is very good, and it's a privilege for me to be convener.